Okay, hello class. It's a senior seminar. I'm hunkered down in the house bunker, uh, avoiding the sidewalks where Tebow and I couldn't even walk up the sidewalk this morning. And I've got this hilarious video I might post of him trying to get traction and not being able to. But I thought we'd just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and do the lecture on this video for chapter 4. So let's just get it over with. I know that's how you feel sometimes, but I hope you get something out of this. And if the videos don't work, I don't know if they'll work on this. I don't know if I can do it on this. I'll post them as attachments. Okay? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move this. I don't know if you can see that, but it's in the way. There we go. Chapter 4, the structure of abundance. So up to chapter 4, he's kind of told you what the consumer society is, what's wrong, what's broken, but he's not against purchasing the capitalist system. He's just wanting us to use our brains and to think about it intentionally, and he's going to show you the structure, a framework of abundance, because we always talk about the negative side, but we don't talk about necessarily about the positive side. This is like when positive psychology came in, it was to challenge the idea that, if you're depressed, I'm going to bring you back up to 0, so you'll just be, just boring. Instead of how do I increase my capacity for psychological functioning? Well, this is the same thing on social, community building, social side, sociology. How do we produce a more healthier sociology? One way of approaching that is abundance. And we can look at abundance and build a structure and kind of build a map for increasing abundance. Whoops, I went too far already. Okay. Abundance is about the variety of gifts and what is most personal and idiosyncratic to families and neighborhoods. So that's a big word, idiosyncratic. What that means to me in this context is how each family is a unique mix of gifts and abilities and experiences that all come together as a group. So in each family you have that, and then each neighborhood is built of groups of people, sometimes families banding together, or sometimes individuals from each family coming together for a specific particular thing that they're doing. Okay, and that I can't think of the word. The summary of that is the variety of gifts and the personal creativity that each of us brings to those in groups. And here Block and McKnight, they write this: what we have is enough. We value what we have and find it satisfying. So I tell you guys this all the time as students, as human beings. Like, even individually, this is true. You have innate, 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 inborn gifts that you're specially designed, either designed to do certain things in the world, maybe even missions. Maybe you're born for such a time as this. Some people don't believe in any of that. They think it's just all random. And, the existentialist, it says life is meaningless. Or I'm watching this film called The Sinner, where Nietzsche is featured in this, where Nietzsche says if you look into the abyss long enough, you better be careful, because if you look in the abyss, the emptiness of the reality that we live in, the actual emptiness, as he describes it, if you look into that long enough, it'll start looking back at you. Now that'll keep you up at night. Um, so some people believe in that there's nothing, there's no meaning, and people like, I think you and me, mostly you and most of you believe there's some meaning in life, there's some purpose. Um, but even if you don't, even if you embrace the fact that we're here for a very short time and then we die, and so, like Kierkegaard, you ask the question, well, what is the, that still leads you to, well, why, what is the point? So all of us have a point. So we have to find, what we have is enough, whatever that is. We value what we find and find it satisfying. This is true about who we are personally and with respect to material goods. We do not need to operate on the half full glass of scarcity to give value to things or qualities we are most interested in, or qualities. I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. We do not need to operate on the half full glass of scarcity to give value to things or qualities. We are most interested in abundance. So in other words, we're not looking at the glass as half empty. We want to look at the half full side. How are we full? How are we fulfilled? How can we take what we have, accept it, and create with it what we can, instead of, oh, I don't have enough, I'm going to buy more. I need more. I need to get more. I need to eat more. I need to watch more. I need to do more. I need to get more. We get another narrative, another Netflix video, another video game, another car, another, whatever. You get it. We have the capacity to provide what we need in the face of the human condition. And I just love these statements. That's why I copied these out of the book. And obviously this is a lecture about commentary on the book and how I see the meaning behind what Block and McKnight have created through the book. And so I've taken these statements that I really feel I want to narrow things down and we can focus on. We believe that this family and neighborhood have the capacity to collectively handle an uncertain future and to endure and transcend whatever faces us. We can imagine creating together a future beyond this moment. We can learn how to make visible and harvest what up to now has been invisible and treated as though it were scarce. And I apply this. I can take this to my chickens. I have a chicken house. Someday I'm going to do a video walkthrough of my farm, my urban garden and chicken house out there. But I have ability to vision. I can have a vision of the future, even down to the fact that I know I'm going to have 4 to 8 eggs every time I go out there in the evening. I collect 4 to 8 eggs that the chickens have laid. And I can imagine the garden. Right now I've got probably, I've probably got 300 or 400 or 500 plants growing, little seedlings growing in my light grow room. I'll have to do a tour of all this when I get it straightened up so it doesn't look so bad. And then I'm going to bring you guys out here, and I'm going to bring you over sometime to my house and let you, maybe we'll eat a meal together and let you look at my urban garden. As it's always in a state of flux, so it drives my poor wife crazy because she wants everything put away and everything to look finished. And it's never going to be finished because it's always growing and it's reproducing, and it goes through stages, and I run out of energy and I can't do everything it needs to be done today. But I'll get to it tomorrow, and if I don't get it done, it's okay. We have enough. So I can imagine right now what we're facing right now with COVID and political drama. I can imagine a neighborhood, my little neighborhood here, where we can build together. They share their leaves with me, and I layer the leaves out on my garden and let them rot. And then I'm going to buy bags of garden soil and throw a bag of garden soil on top of the leaves, dig down through the leaves, plant some squash seeds, and then build a trellis that the squash plants can grow up on, and harvest and and let the squash plants and the other plants that I plant out there break down these leaves and this garden soil and create more inches, 2 or 3 or 4 inches of new soil on the side of this hill, where before I had mostly clay, which is great for minerals and very fine particular minerals that you can't find that you find in abundance in that heavy soil, but not so good on the aeration of the soil. So I'm producing aeration and fiber and all kinds of I'm trying to think of the word, I can't think of it. But anyway, just to loosen up the soil so it can breathe. Soil needs to breathe to be fertile. So that's what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm imagining this future beyond this moment. So I probably babbled on too long about that. Sorry. We think about the context we find ourselves. We organize our world in a context of cooperation and satisfaction. We do not need competition to motivate our children or ourselves. My neighbors are motivated, I think, through the generosity where I give to them, and they give me something that I want. I want their leaves. They think I'm weird because they're throwing their leaves away and I'm taking them out and throwing them on my garden. And I've got 2 neighbors now that are they're donating their leaves to me. And I don't know what I'm going to do if 2 or 3 more neighbors get there. I probably will be overwhelmed, and I'll just build compost piles where you, anyway. So we look at the context. I see the cooperation that's growing from a few simple gifts of vegetables and eggs to my neighbors, not expecting anything in return, not asking for money. They've asked me if I wanted to get paid, and I may end up selling some of my produce. I'm hoping to have a farmer's market this summer, but we don't need competition to motivate ourselves. We want to do it because we like each other and we get to know each other. A productive economy does not need to be competitive. Okay, we can produce here without being in competition with each other. Association life can cooperatively produce what systems have been selling. So I'm not trying to get rid of Amazon, not trying to get rid of Walmart. I do want to support small businesses, but I can also be a small business in and of myself. So a busyness, a production of cooperation, and also produce. It's produce that we can eat. It's produce that we can share, both in their neighborliness and in the vegetables and eggs themselves and leaves. We're responsible for each other. This is the meaning of community. The Bible says, am I my brother's keeper? That's the question. And I think Jesus says yes. But you have to not be codependent about it. Codependency says, I have to do this for you because the Bible says so, and if I don't do it, I won't be following the rules. No, you do it out of love and abundance for your brother. And you don't do things that your brother could do that for themselves. But say my brother is trapped in an addiction. They've lost the power to do some things themselves, make choices about whether they participate in certain behaviors. So they need intervention. They need somebody who will say the tough thing, will challenge them, intervene on their cycle of addiction. And because they're scared to death, I almost said the wrong word there, scared to death of, they feel like they're going to die. That's what addiction tells you. If you don't do this, you're going to die. Well, when you intervene, you don't necessarily produce joy immediately. The joy comes later when they're free of their addiction. But you have to interrupt the cycle, and they tend to rebel against that, fight back because they don't want to die, and their addiction's telling them they're going to die. So our future is dependent on each of us, and if one of us is not free or valued or participating in a full life, then these are not. So all of that isn't possible for any of us. So Gina Elias at Building Bridges used to say, probably still does say, that if one of us isn't, I can't remember how she puts it, but it's similar to this. If one of us isn't, I always say it this way: if we're not all here, we're not all here. If we're not all present, somebody's not present that needs to be here, we're not all here. So that's why you welcome people even when they come in late. You might, if it's disrupting the process of what you need to do, you might have to look at how important is what you need to do, that you can't interrupt for people. But you can also look at, is this person have a behavior that, maybe a habit, that is also not helping them participate by being late, so to speak. So you have to make intentional choices and live a thoughtful life to do this. We live with the reality of the human condition. We know people are fallible. We know people are going to be late. We welcome them, even because we're glad they're here. We're glad they're with us. We understand what we can and cannot do. Sorrow, aging, illness, celebration, fallibility, failure, misfortune, and joy are natural and inevitable. Life is not a problem to be solved or services to be obtained. I ought to put that on a poster. Life is not a problem to be solved or services to be obtained. But if we're not careful, our addiction is consumerism in the United States especially, where we have more than enough. That was Tebow. He doesn't like the mailman jiggling we have a mail slot that they put the mail through, and it makes this metal noise, and Tebow goes nuts anyway. So that's one of your things you'll have to tell me about when you do your reflection. Tell me what Tebow barks about in the video. So life is not a problem to be solved or services to be obtained. Community competence. What is it? A competent community is the most likely means of preventing, in the first place, those dissatisfactions for which the marketplace says you need answers. So the competent community prevents the idea, this dissatisfaction. It produces satisfaction, is another way to say that. You don't need anything other than the community. The community offers you everything you need. If you live next to me, you can probably have all the eggs you ever want. Because eight eggs a day, if I'm averaging 6 eggs a day, I can't eat that many. I mean, we could, but then we'd be, I don't know, something wrong with us. I'm not going to be hungry, and I know that my neighbor's not going to be hungry for eggs. A competent community builds within the family and neighborhood the power to provide for themselves much of what systems and consumerism would have us purchase. So we create what we need instead of, or we provide for each other what we need instead of looking for outside sources. That's why I like gardening, because I produce food that I would have bought at the store, and that literally has been transported thousands of miles so that I can have strawberries in the winter. They've transported this produce internationally to get to me. Imagine how much fuel cost is involved in that alone, much less the labor, all the people that have to fly. Instead of canning my strawberries in the summer so I have strawberry jam in the winter. I want to produce, I want perfect strawberries. I want strawberries that the only way you can get them is through chemicals being sprayed on them at the right time so that the insects that are attacking them because of the culture of agriculture that we have agriculture, the culture of that is a system that produces tons of weight, it produces tons of weight in strawberries, but can only do that through spraying chemicals on to kill the bugs and the diseases in order because of the very agriculture that's causing those insects to be present. In other words, if I grow the same strawberries in my garden, I may have insects, but I won't have insects because the strawberries, there's so many strawberries in one spot. In other words, I didn't grow 1,000 acres of strawberries or 100 acres of strawberries. I grew a 4 by 8 foot bed of strawberries, and then on the other side of there's kale, and on the other side of that's lettuce, and on the other side of that's squash, so that the insects tend to become less viable because of the culture, my agriculture. I'm sorry, I got off on that. Well, I'm not sorry, but anyway. And it talks about young people. We think about young people having problems, teenagers. Here's an example. The reason why many young people have so many problems that need servicing is that they are raised without a culture of community where they are a part of something. They're raised with nothing useful to do, no purpose. The teenage years are difficult under any conditions, but are made more so when teenagers are not needed. In the absence of purpose, they search for the belonging found in social networking. For youth, the peer group is a substitute for the community of family and neighborhood. Their friends mean the world to them in the absence of community. So maybe you've heard me say this before. Teenagers were invented by our society that doesn't need the family to work in the garden so that we can literally have food in the winter. We don't have it's not necessary anymore for our young people to be involved in our family business, or in our family, the business of keeping ourselves alive. We don't even require sometimes our kids to mow the lawn. We hire somebody to do that. They have nothing to do but video games or hang out on the street corner. Maybe that's the old days, hanging out on the street corner in your leather jacket and looking like the Fonz. I don't know if you guys even know who the Fonz is, but anyway, the 1950s hoodlums. My sister used to call them, from her age, she's 8 years older than me, hoodlums. Back in the 50s, these kids that rebelled against their families and cultures and all that. Anyway, in the absence of a community need, these kids don't have anything to do. And of course, that's what created the teenage problems, is because we quit including people that need to have a purpose, a sense of what, we're going back to the existential. They need to be able to decide what is meaningful. Why were they created? What purpose do they have? What are they good at? Do they get the joy of seeing a young plant grow from the seed that they plant? They might do that in grade school, where you sprout the bean seeds, and that's a cool thing. But do you get to plant that bean seed somewhere? A lot of schools do this now. They'll have a garden outside, and the grade school kids will, in the absence of a family doing this, we hire a school to replace. And I'm glad they do this, but that should be done at home. Every family could have a garden on their porch. Could have a container garden. It's not that hard, and there's YouTube showing you exactly how to do it. Sorry, I'll get up on my garden thing. We have to have priorities. A competent community has three properties. Focus on gifts of its members. I think that might be as three priorities. The focus is on the gifts of its members. We nurture associational life, and we offer hospitality, the welcoming of strangers. And I may post, I think I have a hospitality handout that I think I took out of one of the McKnight books. I don't know which one, or Block books, but anyway, it talks about hospitality. Collective properties. These collective properties create the communal conditions for the emergence in families and neighborhoods of certain capacities. So this is actually the opposite of the collective that Karl Marx talked about, or the collective that communists talk about, or the collective that Black Lives Matter, who are an openly communist organization. They state it openly on their website. And for those of you that have grown up that are younger, you may not have heard about even the evil of communism, but it's evil. I'm not saying the human beings that are caught up in communism are evil. Many times there's a group of people right here in the United States who would love to create a communist society, socialist society. And there's evil that comes with that. Just like there's evil with consumerism, there's evil that comes with communism. And I prefer the evil of consumerism because we have the choice around that. Where in communism, they tell you what you're going to say. They tell you how much you're going to have. And they equalize everything so that you don't have any choice. But this is the opposite of that. This is a collective which creates family. And in communism, they break down the family. They don't see the need for the family. The state is your mom and dad. So you actually, in Russia, in the Soviet Union, they used to encourage their kids to turn in their parents if their parents weren't towing the party line. But this is involving capacities, kindness, generosity, cooperation, forgiveness, acceptance of fallibility, and I think one of his that he loves most of all is mystery. The origin of the capacities and properties. They are abundant and exist as a potential in everybody. And I love this potential. Even with PTSD, they started the research that I read to do my dissertation about PTSD, recovering from the trauma, was that they learned that there's potential traumatic events. So instead of assuming that everyone's going to have PTSD that goes through, say, the bombing of 9/11 or the childhood abuse, not everybody has PTSD as a result of that. Some people bounce better or have had the context in which they were nurtured afterwards, or their temperament that they're born with is more can handle certain things. It doesn't make people that do have PTSD. It doesn't mean you're weaker. It means you're more. It may mean you're more sensitive. Your receiver is more fine-tuned, or we found out that the children who have attachment disorders, as we were defining them in Dr. Randolph's research, we found out that some of those kids, the more intelligent they are, the higher their IQ, the more and we believe it's because the more they comprehend what's happening to them, the more they're outraged, the more they can be affected by it. So it appeared that the more intelligent the little children were, who were receiving the neglect, or I guess you were not receiving what they needed, they were more affected than effected. They had more damage done. Whereas people who had less intelligence, as we measure it according to an IQ test, I'm not making a value judgment there, I'm just saying that as you measure, the lower measurements showed that those kids seemed to be less affected. They were less damaged by this neglect and abuse that they receive. So the origins of competence, capacities, and properties, they are abundant and exist as a potential in everybody. Everybody's got them. They await a nurturing context in which to be manifested. So it goes back to Carl Rogers' organismic property, that we all have an organismic property to grow, and we need the nurturing, we need the food, the fertilizer, the fertile context. And then when manifested, it's evident that a community has become competent. So when it happens, it's obvious that the community has become competent. Things work. We're able to handle things. In competent communities, families and neighborhoods produce satisfaction. We feel a sense of satisfaction just being in the community. The shift we seek begins when we declare that the properties and capacities that make up a community, competent community, exist in human nature. So we begin to assume that there's not only potential trauma, there's also potential that's available in the competence, in capacities and properties. We all have potential capacities and properties that may need nurtured, or may be being nurtured, that then manifest themselves as a result of that. And then there's a collective manifestation in a community. Hope you guys are getting all this, because I'm really on a roll today. The collective gifts then involve community knowledge. It allows community competence, allows our collective gifts and sorrows to become community knowledge. It's not that we ignore the sad things, the loss. So we live in a world of loss. Look at how much we've lost in the last year. Look at the freedoms that we've lost. Look at the choices that we've given over to other people. We try to listen to experts, quote unquote, and we don't know which experts to listen to. Because instead of listening to experts, why don't we listen to ourselves? Why don't we go into ourselves and ask ourselves, what is the truth? Instead of living in fear, I'm going to live with community knowledge. A challenge to the depersonalization of consumerism, stereotyping, standardizing, generalizing in the system of the world. So community knowledge is a challenge to this. We know better. Within the family and neighborhood, we share my unique gifts and revealing my unique sorrows. And the individuation, in other words, each of us has a way of interacting. We all have a individual receiver, so to speak, and giver and broadcaster. And so as we receive and then broadcast, integrate, and create, then we broadcast what we create into the world. And we're limited only by our imagination, only by the limits we put on ourselves. And I know that sounds idealistic and over the top, but I really believe it's true. And the fact that we can't believe in ourselves, or we can believe in ourselves only to a certain boundary, and then we stop because, we can't go there. But human beings can go there. And then individuation can emerge only in the context of hospitality, welcoming, in association with others, based on our gifts. What happens if our abundance remains invisible? Well, it obviously doesn't produce. There's so much, it would be a terrible waste. So, how do we deal with this thing of privacy? This is quite the deal right now. It's always been quite the deal. Privacy is the domain of professionalized services. This idea of confidentiality. Here's the shadow side of confidentiality. The shadow side of confidentiality is that we're not letting others know our troubles. It undermines the community capacity to join our lives and give them meaning. So our non-trust society, we don't trust our neighbors because they might gossip. So we don't trust we don't believe that instead of talking to our neighbors about how important it is for us to to have guidelines, like we have our guidelines now in the front, and my wife and I even use guidelines when we give our next week, when we give we were supposed to do it tonight, but when we give our little story of how we got together, I'm going to share our guidelines that we use when we're in our right minds and we remember to do it. We use that sheet of guidelines, go over it, we say it, what it means to us, and then we pray. Part of our guidelines is to pray before we start. That's the only way we're going to get through it. In any of our any full abundant relationship has to include, in my mind at least, the idea of a power greater than ourselves that can restore us to sanity and help keep us sane. We find abundance in community not only when our gifts are acknowledged, but also when our sorrows are revealed. Community competence depends on our willingness to share with others what is most intimate and personal. When we disclose a secret, others now have the information and know how to use their gifts to deal with it. We are establishing a pattern for how we might deal with human condition of our community, a political act in the best sense, reclaiming power from professionals who are sworn to secrecy. So when we go in and we share when people share with us as professionals in secrecy, they cheat themselves by not, if they don't find a community where they can share it. So we send them to AA so they can have a community to share it, or Celebrate Recovery so they can have a community that they can trust. And it's not typically the church on Sunday morning, because you could trust that, but it's not an environment that's a context where you can feel safe enough to share. You don't have, their only sense of community you have is maybe your small group members who you run into at the large group meeting. You don't go out and share in a large group because there's people who are still lost and not part of the community that may or may not be able to handle what you're sharing. So you find a group of people, a smaller group, where you can share yourself and reclaim the power from people like us who keep it secret. And we have to have that deal. That's our purpose. We have a specialized purpose in the community, a place where somebody can come and talk about the thing they feel like they can't trust anyone else with, that they can't even trust themselves. They can't bring themselves to admit openly. So gift-mindedness for citizens. We recognize individual capacities and skills. This creates satisfaction. Competent communities build on gifts of people. It knows that a gift is not a gift until it is given. It creates a functional family. This is a family that has discovered its capacity, produced for itself, together with a competent community, all that is required for a truly good life, a satisfying life. So the question is, what happens if the gifts are kept wrapped? What if we had Christmas morning and we decided this year we're just not going to open those gifts? We're going to let them stay there. What if we let them stay there for a month? Would they have the same meaning? Or what would we miss if we didn't open our gifts and unwrap them? What if we kept them secret? Our personal gifts. That's what we're doing now, most of us. We don't share our gifts. Most of you have a chance to do that. Students tend to do it because you're in a situation where nobody's paying you most of the time. Nobody's paying you, and you have the opportunity to have relationships with your roommate, with the people in your classes, and you can, and it's a unique situation. Or you go to a practicum where you're not being paid, you're just volunteering, and you're practicing, you're expected to practice. You shouldn't, if as long as your practicum instructors and supervisors understand this, they don't expect you to have it all together. They don't expect you to know what you're doing. That's the beauty of being a student. I don't get no satisfactions. That's my Stone song. I should have had it on here. I don't think I do. I usually put a link. Satisfaction grows out of the understanding that what we have is enough. We already have most of what we need to create satisfaction. The question becomes, how do we combine what we have to create with what these functions demand? I left a word out. The question becomes, how do we combine what we have to create with what these functions demand? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? So that's from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you haven't seen it, you really should. It's really quite a clever little film. And you'd also get references to a lot of movies right now. The system world calls for alignment, where differences are a problem to be solved. So we have to all line up and bring our problems to be solved, and look at everything. Differences are a problem. We need to all be the same. That's the communist collective. We don't value individual. In fact, we don't want to hurt anybody. We have to make sure that everybody gets whatever they want or need, even if they don't work for it, even if they don't join forces with us. And there are certain people in society that do need that. I'm not saying that we don't need to help those that can't help themselves, but I'm talking about a state that oversees what you need and decides what you need, decides what medical systems you need, instead of letting you choose. In focusing on gifts, we get beneath differences or above them to something more foundational, where people can find common ground. We don't put people outside our value system. We include them in it. We speak to their gifts rather than their differing values or visions. So we include people of all kinds, all belief systems. We don't let them run over us. We don't sacrifice our own values, but we certainly accept them where they are and begin where they're at. Begin and join with them. Beneath our differences are common concerns: raising a child, concern for the land, being healthy, etc. Even the earth has community and associations. I'm going to play this. I'm not going to play this here. I'm going to post this video for you. It is a YouTube by, I don't know the guy's name. I think they showed it on.
So for some of you, it may seem strange to talk about soil in a conference about
Oh,
food.
yes. This gentleman.
And the reason
I'll
for that
post
is
his name.
because food
This is
for
really
us,
cool.
for most of us,
Fred Kirschman.
we've created a food
Kirschman.
culture that essentially sees food as a
Anyway,
commodity.
I will
So what is, for many of us,
let you watch that later, so you don't have to sit. So mostly because I don't have to sit through and wait for it to get over with. I'll get the video over, and then you can go forward. In the consumer economy has invaded or colonized most every corner of life but one: associations and associational life. So this thing about colonizing, you see, when the United States came, when the Europeans, Spanish, English, Swedish, Netherlands, all these groups, when America was discovered, they all came over here. French, Francais, all these different people from different countries came over here and established colonies, you see. And you think about bees. Bees have colonies where this colonized group of bees colonizes an area and fertilizes the flowers and produces honey. But they colonize uh, the area that they're in. Well, we as human beings colonize the the North American continent and South American continent, and we colonized it, and we subjugated the indigenous peoples who were here. We brought in slaves, and these are all the evils that are being pointed out today. Well, it wasn't all evil. We also uh, we provided a place for more people to live. We created a country that where the values and foundational values of it actually freed the slaves and recognized the subjugation that we did. But this idea of that's what they're talking about, colonization. We come in and we do this, and it's evil. I mean, honestly, it is. It's taking away what's there and invading it with our own way of living, and not integrating, but overwhelming. That's what happened in the indigenous cultures. Um, if you if you take social problems, I'll show you some really shocking things that have occurred back in the day before, and because we produced a thing called the United States of America with a constitution that actually safeguards peoples. So it may not have started out right, because actually the Europeans came over here and invaded this country, this land, with European values as we had them then, some of which were good. They had a good judicial system, but some of which are bad. That's why we changed our Constitution so that every person had the right to try to live a life of satisfaction. And we have the choices to do that. For the bottom there, I won't read all this. For people to do a real social good, they come together for some other reason and do a social good out of their peripheral vision. Some of these statements, you could meditate on this for a day or two. You could share, I want you to share that statement with somebody outside of our program. For people to do a real social good, they come together for some other reason and do a social good out of their peripheral vision. So ask people to break that down, or you break it down for them and ask them what that means to them, and put that in your reflection and smoke it. Individual communal properties and capacities, gifts, associations, and hospitality. These properties form the structure that allows people in community to manifest kindness, generosity, cooperation, forgiveness, and the acceptance of fallibility and mystery, or capacities. Property and capacity, there's two possibilities. Individual capacity, one person likes another. Communal capacity, together we value kindness. A hospitable community calls forth kindness from its members, and when this happens, something greater is produced. I am a part of a circle in which kindness is evoked and valued and named. Ways to do properties. How do we take action? So in techniques of counseling, we're talking about this. How do we help people come to produce, to do it, to take action? There's two ways. How do we do it together? The other is, how do we together allow me to do it individually? So how can we all get together and do it? Or how can we support each other to do it individually? Suppose I say, let's you and me and her cook dinner for those people across the street who have lost a loved one. In this case, we are doing kindness together. We are collectively kind. We are performing an act of kindness as a group. When I show kindness as an individual act in a competent community, I not only feel good, but also am rewarded for being kind. This is community that creates space for me to be kind and values it. So when my neighbor receives the eggs I give them, I I believe they feel kind toward me, and they share their whatever they can. If they want to share dollars with me, if I allow that, then I'm going to receive that if anybody asks. From now on, and maybe a little bit, just to help pay for the $1,000 an egg that I've invested in my chickens, which that'll all pay off in the end. But I'm not worried about that. I'd rather, that's my tithe. See, I'm tithing to my community, and then I'm tithing to God as well. So tithing isn't just about giving money to churches. It's about giving of everything to everyone. And what did the guy that went to Jesus and said, how much should I give? He said, everything. And the guy walked away sad, right? So that's what this is. So I'll keep going. I could talk about this for hours. Obviously, I'm going to talk about it at least for an hour. I'm at 22 out of 41 slides. I might save some of this for Thursday. Maybe we'll be out of the ice storm by Thursday. That's why I'm doing this one online. There's a social fabric. If, on the other hand, in the context of the consumer way, the meal is ordered and delivered from a restaurant, it is still a kind act. Might do that for them. We'll order it from Pizza Hut. The problem is that while it is good for the economy, it does not build the social fabric of the neighborhood. This is so key, because we can feed the people next door, and we can help the person that owns the Pizza Hut feed their family, or we could feed each other and produce a fabric, a networking in the community that is solid. It doesn't help build the fabric of the neighborhood if you order it. It's not as effective, right? It may build a little bit of the neighborhood to go ahead and feed them with a pizza, but when they see that you've cooked and grown the food that yourself, and grown the eggs and fry the eggs up for them and have a breakfast or whatever you're doing, when you're giving so much more of yourself, and you're sacrificing yourself rather than just your money. I mean, your money is a sacrifice. You earned it by sacrificing to someone else. So there's good in that. But he's talking about building the fabric of the neighborhood. Kinds of associations. Associations come in three forms: locations, functions, and interests. You can almost see de Tocqueville chuckling at his description of what Americans will associate around. He said American associations are productive, prodigious, futile, fertile, that should be fertile, and almost unimaginable at the same time. Okay, I think I will stop here. And so you have a couple of things to do that I've asked you to do in your reflection about this video in PowerPoint, this half of the PowerPoint. And I'd like you to watch the video, obviously, post a reaction to Fred in the video. How does that apply to what we're talking about in community? Also, I think there was a thing about Tebow in there. And my wife just shut the door, so she's trying to be quiet when I'm doing my video. So anyway, love you guys, and I will see you on Thursday, hopefully, if we ever get out from under the ice. Bye-bye.